And welcome to the planning committee. Item 1, to sign the minutes. Is your wish I've signed as correct record, members?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. Apologies for absence, please.
Apologies receiving councillor Richard Hall, Chairman.
Right, everybody else is here, so... Right, members' interests. Yes, look. Councillors, Owen Swift first.
If I don't see Mr. Cox, but if he appears, I will have to leave the room if he on for the Spartan.
Thank you.
So if he's not speaking, should I stay or should I leave the room? Could I have clarification?
Through you, Chairman, the Article 4 direction is actually served on Mr. Cox and the other party.
So I will have to leave because I know Mr. Cox.
I think you should say.
Right, Councillor Longley.
Yeah, I've got 4 disclosures, Chair. First is...
4?
These newcomers.
My first one for voting, so there you are.
Right, list them then.
Okay, not in any particular order. The first is for Barbie, which in fact is in the district of Cricket Braunston, which I'm the county councillor. The second one is for Welton.
Is that the only interest, by the way, County Council?
In that particular one.
Yes, well, okay.
Yeah.
You're okay with that?
I'm going to come back to that one.
Okay.
In Welton, the same applies. It's within the district.
In delegation.
That one's been delegated, which I'm about to announce.
Okay. The third one is when we get round to the Article 4 in Stratton, the name of the company, PRP, that put the structural report actually rent property from me, and I know the particular individual who wrote the report professionally, not personally. So I wrote the structural report.
What's the position there, sir?
I would have thought that you disclosed the interest. I can't see any reason why she would remain as well.
Okay. And finally, come back to Barbie. I've got strong associations with the applicant, so I will be leaving the room on that occasion.
Okay. Councillor.
Chair, I've been advised by the compliance officer that because of my knowledge of the directors, some of whom are personal friends of mine, I should also withdraw on the application DA 20170-229 Barbie.
Okay. And behind you as well.
Thank you, Chair. DA 2170349 Whedon. I live in the neighbouring property and know the applicant, so I'll be leaving for that particular.
Thank you, Councillor. It's quite rare to have all those interests. It's very rare we get one. Thank you. Party whipping arrangements. Members of the public, that means we don't get together and decide how we're going to vote beforehand on political or any other way. Right, there is one delegated planning application, which is in Welton, in 0369, and it's a delegated approval. So we won't be dealing with that one.
Chairman, Councillor Ford is not there. I'm sure he will have signed his apology. Councillor Colin Ford.
Yes. I don't know whether he's turning up or not.
Through you, Chairman, he indicated to me earlier that he might be 10 or 15 minutes late.
Right. So we could have him still. Right. Going back to party whipping arrangements, I've told you that. There's a few bits of housekeeping which I must remind you of. The fire alarm bell rings. Please exit the door. It won't be a test. Please exit the way you came in. Please switch your mobile phone devices to silent, which I haven't, because it'll cost you £10 to the chairman's charity. And we strictly keep to that as well. If it's very loud, if it's a very quiet one, we just take £5. Speakers will have 3 minutes, and after that they'll be asked to wind up. That is the opportunity for you to, only opportunity for members of the public to speak, so please don't interrupt, which I'm sure you won't, the rest of the debate. And I'm sure the rest doesn't apply with you, that doesn't apply to you. It's no clapping, cheering, booing, hissing, and standing up and waving your arms, but you don't look like you're going to. During the meeting, you will see officers talking at the same time as you're talking, which looks incredibly bad manner. They're trying to get an answer for the point you're making, so that they can give you the answers at the end of the point that you make. Update on performance, well, we get that regularly now by email, so we won't be dealing with that tonight. Start with the first application on the agenda, which is 0689, and it's in Abbey South.
Thank you, Chairman. The site actually relates to the Coach and Horses Public House, which lies on the south side of Warwick Street. I think members will probably be quite familiar with this particular site. The site extends back from the road and also includes a number of extensions to the rear of the pub, as well as a number of two-storey outbuildings. The land to the rear of the site is mainly grass and slopes upwards to the neighbouring site, which is actually a school. You'll see from the application report, the application proposes the conversion of existing buildings, also the construction of some new buildings to accommodate 6 flats. That's 4 one-bedroom flats, 2 two-bedroom flats, 3 new houses, which are 1 bedrooms, and the new building will also accommodate 3 two-bedroom houses. You'll also see from the report that the application has been brought before members owing to concerns raised by the local highway authority regarding the lack of car parking provision. These concerns are also echoed by the town council, who are otherwise supporting the proposal. In respect to all other technical issues, there are no technical impediments to the application. However, as the report is put forward, there is no car parking included within the proposal. However, in the context of the site is a sustainable location. It's very close in walking to the town centre with its associated amenities, public transport and facilities. And the local district council has carried out a car parking capacity study which has indicated there is car parking provision and capacity within the town centre. In regard to this provision, officers consider on balance the proposal would result in a refurbishment and improvement to the existing fabric on the frontage of Warwick Street, and as such we're recommending the application be approved, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 local members, Councillor Evans or Councillor Wesley. Councillor Wesley, you can go first.
Last time.
My turn to go first. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Evans. I feel like I said, this is obviously next door to an application that came earlier, which was approved. And I think I'm going to say the same things about this one as I did about that one. I still think that the cars are an issue. I still think that traffic is an issue. I think that bins on the pavement is an issue for them to be picked up. I'm also just a little bit concerned about the change of use and the loss of the public amenity, i.e. being a pub, and I didn't hear anything about the circumstances surrounding that in the report, because to me it does seem a little bit odd that this pub is deemed not to be viable when there are many other such, well, not many other pubs, but there are pubs in Daventry. There are pubs around the corner, and there are proposals for new hostelries in the town. And I'm not quite sure why it is deemed to be a non-viable public house in reality, in effect. I'd also just like a little bit of clarification on page 15, where the BBC Local Strategy Planning Policy Summary, just on the conflict, because I wasn't quite sure what that was saying on there, if I'm totally honest. Like I said, overall, I just think this is another lot of houses, and no need houses, but I just think it's a bit detrimental, losing the pub. It's quite an attractive building from the outside. It's got a coaching arch, and if that was a change of use, I don't think it should be changed to houses. But let me listen to what the people say, and I won't make any proposal at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have some of the same concerns. I will say that The pub did close, stayed closed for a while. Somebody else took it on, but it was hardly open 5 minutes before it closed again, and it's been closed since. So I take it whoever I did ask just didn't make a go of it. I like what they're going to do with the buildings themselves. I think they'll make some nice houses and flats there. My concern is about the three at the back. I would rather have not seen them, and I would rather have had parking in there, but that's not the thing that we've got in front of us. Out on the road, you'd get about one car in between where the bus stop is and the white line start for the crossing. You could get two if you parked one in front of the gate, but of course that's going to be a waste of time. So they will have to go somewhere else. And I know we keep being told that not everybody will have a car. But then again, all the people that come to live there, there's not much chance that they're already in Daventry, so they'll need transport of some sort. So on the whole, I'm quite happy with it. One thing I would ask, and I don't know whether it would be possible, the road opposite that goes down to housing place, cars are always parking down there. They had problems when the pub was there, and they found out at the time that if a fire engine wanted to go down there, it had problems. I just wondered if there's a chance that this and others might bring cars in, whether we could perhaps look at getting yellow lines down there, just for the safety, because if there's a fire down there, the only way to get to that building is down that road. They can't get through it into the Warwick Court. It's too far.
Wish to make comment on that? Right.
Through you, Chairman, if there's any road safety concerns, I'm sure they'll be picked up by highways and with the road joint action route. So that's something that could be addressed.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. We've seen this site before, and we all know how desperate this area is for development. I've actually looked inside this place some time ago, a couple of years ago now probably, and the place needs a huge amount of money spending on it. It's only into a viable pub. In fact, it's not viable for that very reason. It needs too much money spending on it. So this is probably the only alternative that stands a chance of making any headway, and therefore I'm in favour of it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fratchman.
Thank you, Chair. I too have these concerns about parking, but I'm sure as we've looked at 2 or 3 other similar schemes around the town, there always seems to be enough car parking space. I don't know when that doesn't become an issue, or when it does become an issue, there isn't enough car parking space. But I just want to confirm a couple of things, because I just looked at the conditions, but if we are minded to pass this, I would like it to still look like a pub from outside, and I'm guessing that is something we can condition, and perhaps even keeping the pub sign on the wall. And are we is keeping the cobbles and the sort of historic fabric part of the application as well? I just wanted confirmation of that, because if that is the case, then I'm happy to propose that we accept officers' advice.
Okay, officers, is that the case on those 2
I'm afraid I can't confirm about the cobbles themselves, but obviously in regards to the alterations to the fabric of the building itself, you'll see from the report that there have been strict amendments and mental plans, and they're the plans before us tonight, and the conservation officer is happy with the proposal now. Obviously, I'm sure it's in the interest of the conservation officer to ensure
I'll second that, Chair.
features which are important to conserving the conservation area are always retained.
Because one of the conditions is about materials and getting approval, so I guess at that stage that's sort of covered by that, is it?
Very strict.
That's good. So I'd like to propose that we accept officers' advice.
Right. Do we have a seconder? Would you like to speak now, Councillor Robinson, or not?
No, I've already spoken.
You've already spoken. Okay, Councillor Ritchie next.
Well, I mean, to me the parking is an obvious concern with this. I can remember not long ago we dealt with a similar application quite close by in Warwick Street. At that time I recall being told of the survey of parking space at different times of the day that had been done in Daventry, and I think that we were promised that we would be sent the data. I haven't received it. But here we're talking about creating 12 units of accommodation. Is that right? Now that could potentially be 12, it could be more than 12. Additional cars looking for a place to park there. The actual frontage in the street, if you don't have parking around the back, the actual frontage in the street only allows what, perhaps a couple of cars, small ones, you might get in 3, and that is where people are going to come back, having been to the supermarket and done their shopping and everything else, wanting a place to stop and unload. I just don't feel that that is realistic. Clearly, we want to keep the building. It's a bit of history. I know that it isn't shown off in the way that it ought to be because of the surrounding properties and the rather dilapidated nature of parts of Warwick Street. But you know, I feel that we should do everything we can to hold on to it, and whatever the decision we take, I feel, as others have said, it is important that the frontage is retained and protected in any way that we can actually protect it. But I have that concern too. That if it was going to go in the direction of becoming residential accommodation, that there needs to be parking somewhere at the back in the space that is there, even if that means fewer residential units. So in the grounds of parking, I can't support it. But I find it difficult to support too, for the same reasons as put forward by Councillor Wesley. You know, here we are. We want to be a growing, thriving town. We've already seen a pub close not terribly far away from this. And I just feel that if we're going to be doing that, you know, this is not the route that we want. Yes, you can build new pubs somewhere else, but the attraction of a traditional pub is the fact that it has got a certain link with history, whether it's a rather pseudo link or not. I just feel that this is not something that we should be, you know, throwing away. I can't support it.
Jody, you want to answer something?
I want to come back on a few issues which were raised by members earlier. With respect to the non-viability proposal, whether or not the pub itself and what information has been submitted, just let members that evidence has been submitted to the local authority to demonstrate that the pub has not been viable for a period of time, and also they've sought to market it and put it and try it again, and again it's not been successful through a number of tenants. But as not officers, but we're happy that that has been clearly demonstrated. Regards to the car parking, I do appreciate, yes, that 12 units could result in a number of vehicles being attracted to this site. However, the introduction of car parking is also not without problems itself. Councillor Frenchman and Councillor Robertson talked about the importance of retaining that frontage and retaining the character of these buildings. Ultimately, to accommodate any off-street parking within this site would result in an erosion of that character. You'll see from the photographs, if you could quickly click through to them, that there is an entrance there, but the entrance is very narrow. It's not able to accommodate 2 vehicles passing each other, should vehicles want to use it for parking provision. Equally, the entrance itself isn't of sufficient width to accommodate a modern vehicle this day and age. So to accommodate, entering vehicles to that site and to accommodate the visibility, you'll see from the photograph there that there is a little staircase and a little porch area to the front of that building. These features will have to be removed to accommodate the visibility and the car parking provision. So these are elements which you can take into the balance when you're looking at off-street car parking and weighed up against the retention of those features which will form an important part of the conservation area. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
And if I might add, when it was a very busy pub 5 or 6 years ago, because it's
probably fair to say it's been since it was a very busy pub. It was living accommodation pub, and it really, when it was very, very busy, it would have generated an awful lot of traffic. They would have had big events there, bands, 200 or 300 people there, and it's never had any parking on site. So, you know, people have always managed to find somewhere to park when they were visiting.
Thank you. Councillor Winsworth.
Yes, I would like to say just two things. First, we should comment because it is not, they are flat, 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom flat, and that is what people were asking for. And also about the parking, when they are put for sale, the people will know from the outset that there is no parking. So I do think that the person who will develop that site will have to market it in such a way that if there is a parking, it might have been more expensive. So all in all, I do think, I can understand the problem with parking, but if it's young people, a lot of young people do not have car now because they rely on bicycle and rent car when they need, because a car is too expensive for them to drive, to run. Thank you. I was trying to find the word. But on all in all, I think it's a good scheme, and I would vote with officer advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess my concern is what Mr. Richards actually said, sorry, Councillor Richards, on the car parking. There was actually an application, I think the first one, that showed only 9, which was the development of that pub. And then there was car parking spaces at the back. Then it's now appearing with 3 houses at the back, which aren't new. Now, I'll be corrected here, I'm sure I will be, but I thought we had a policy on car parking of new houses of supplying car parking spaces, which this is not going to do. So it's probably going against that policy. Also, and I don't want to misquote here, so someone again just to make sure I'm right, under the DDC Conservation Officer's notes on page 17, it says the omission of the parking spaces is welcome. So I don't quite understand that at all. So I'd like some clarification, because I think as 3 are new builds, we should be providing car parking spaces.
Thank you. John, would you
If I
like
could
to?
just come back on a number of issues. One's regarding the provision of car parking spaces, as indicated by Councillor Parker under the new County Council document. Yes, there is a requirement by the County Council, however, that document has not been adopted by this local authority. So whilst it's a material consideration, it's not a formally adopted document. So we have to have regard to the weight which that document has.
I wasn't referring to that, sorry to interrupt you. I was referring to our policy at Daventry, where I thought we had to supply car parking spaces, not the Northampton one, 2016 September, which has not been adopted yet by Daventry.
It's not so. And the other point you made?
And obviously there was some...
Sorry, is that no? Was that no? We do not have to supply parking spaces for new houses in Daventry at the moment.
There is not as far as I'm aware, there's not a minimum you have to provide. A lot of it will depend on the transport statements regarding large developments and as to what frequencies and trips are generated by each proposal. Obviously, you'll appreciate that with some housing schemes, depending on the type of house they are, they will require less parking, and some developments will require more parking. I think each case should be judged based on the transport statements which are submitted and the evidence behind those transport statements. I can give an example of a recent proposal I've had for a continuing care village. Now, that particular transport statement relied very heavily on other schemes within other districts and provided me an indication of the frequency of trips associated with that type of use. However, I drew their attention to the fact that whilst these were all material considerations, they should rely more heavily on the transport provision required for that particular site characteristics in regard to the car ownership within our particular district. So each development will require different parking standards, in my opinion, depending on the type of use and the type of development it is. So there's no set parking provision, as far as I'm aware, for Daventry district. The most up-to-date document we have is the county council one.
So
If I just come in, Chairman, I think what basically happened was, what you're alluding to is there was some policy in our old local plan that referred to parking standards in the local plan, but they were superseded a long time ago. And various governments had various ideas on what they were going to do, and I think at one point they were putting in these maximum parking standards, trying to force people to cars and public transport. And I think it was agreed in Daventry, in a rural area, that that probably wasn't realistic and we weren't going to support that proposal. Then the county council produced various iterations of parking standards, some of which were adopted by us and used by us, but then they've superseded them themselves and produced new parking standards. But partly because we're in dispute over what's in that document, we have said to them, well, we don't agree with what's in this document. I know there's several other districts in Northamptonshire who don't agree with them either. So we've said, well, we're not actually going to adopt those standards. We're going to apply what we think is appropriate in a particular case. And I think that reflects the view that was taken by planning committee some time ago, that we would be kind of each case on its merits. And in the rural areas in particular, we'd be expecting to see more parking rather than less parking, in the hope that people would use public transport, because clearly there wasn't any public transport. Now what you've got here is obviously a situation right in the town centre, or on the edge of the town centre, where traditionally we've always said that we don't have such strict parking requirements in the town centre, because people will live in right near to where they want to go anyway, probably if they want to go shopping or whatever, maybe near where they work. And as we've heard before, might not have a car if they're living in a smaller property in the town centre. So generally we have been more relaxed, if you like, in not insisting on total coverage of parking spaces in the urban area in the town centre. Once you go out to the villages, yeah, I'll definitely say we want proper parking spaces, which is why we had that debate, you may remember, on that property in Stratton that had no parking. But again there we said, well, in that particular instance, there isn't ever going to be an opportunity to provide any, so it's a similar situation to what you've got here, and if there is no opportunity to provide any, you've got to take a practical view and say, well, do you want the building to be reused, or do you just want to leave it as it is? And I think we've had this debate last time on these town centre sites, that really we want to regenerate the town centre, and just leaving it as it is isn't really probably going to achieve a lot. So that's the background, if it helps.
It does.
And the other point, Joan?
Obviously, the points which comes back to the comments made by the conservation officer, clearly the reason why they think and believe that no parking is of benefit to this proposal is because they're being able to retain all the features which are important to the conservation officer.
There was one other point. Was there another planning application at any time that didn't have the three houses at the back?
I'm not wholly sure, to be honest with you, Chairman.
Jake, those are the points that have been made. Councillor Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I do apologise for late arrival. Appreciate I won't be allowed to vote because I didn't hear all of the debate. If you want to start again, I don't mind. The Councillor Parker, as far as I'm concerned, that's quite honestly hit the nail on the head. You know, I think the cumulative effect of homes of multiple occupancy, and we can call them what we like, we can call flats, we can call, and within a radius of probably 500 yards, metres in new money, of this application. We have an application which is about 20 yards away. We have a further application at the top of James Street for 26 flats, etc. Yes, you can say that these people, and yes, I do agree with Officer that the pub was an active pub and people did park their cars. or not, as the case may be. The people that live in these places, if you think they're all going to be employed within walking distance or within cycle distance of their abode, I think we're living in cloud cuckoo land. The transport problems within Daventry town, whilst we do have a bus service, it's not the ideal. Try and get a bus to Derf where there is employment or many places locally. I think we do have to address, under whatever policy, in the near future, the cumulative effect of houses of multiple occupancy within our town environs, because at the end of the day we want to invite people. We are proud that we have no parking fees in Daventry apart from the country park. However, we cannot park if local residents gain parking permits to use the car parking spaces. At the end of the day, there will be no parking spaces. It was said at a past meeting that our car parks are full to 89%. Well, as far as 89% is concerned, to me they are full.
Through you, Chairman, that's at the peak. The 89% occupancy is at the peak time, midday, say. It's as low as 40%. There is still plenty of capacity, and I can remind members that there are still only 15 residential car parking permits been issued to residents in Daventry Town Centre, although there are hundreds of people living in Daventry Town Centre, which is the information I provided last time. A similar application was considered. This is not a house and multiple occupation application. These are 12 individual units of 1 and 2 bedrooms.
I take on board what you're saying, and I passed the pub in Flora. When pubs are now turned into coffee shops because Whitbread's, own cost of coffee and they make more money, it's no surprise that the pubs are closing, and but the pub in Flora, if you take that as a for instance, has been turned into a meaningful residential property. It will remain, it will carry on with the name. This could carry on as a beautiful town residential property. I can't say anymore, but I certainly think that Councillor Parker has a point, and we should investigate it.
Right. Thank you. We've got Councillor Smith, and then one more councillor, and then we're going to go to the vote. I think we've had enough. I've got Councillor Smith, Councillor Carr, then I think we've had enough discussion. I think we'll go to the vote then. So Councillor Smith.
Yeah, really for information, thank you, Chair. What's the cost of the parking permit?
Go from memory, like £15 or £18 a year for the first permit.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I'm glad to hear that we have an open sort of policy where we can look at each case and its merit for parking. I believe the government some time ago was 1.5 spaces per household, but this project is an ideal example of it, because if we were to stipulate that they must have parking, i.e. using perhaps some of the area up in the back there, so they couldn't build these 3 new houses, the applicant, Castlemount Estates, probably would turn around and say it's not viable. They probably need to build those properties to make the whole project go ahead. So, Chair, this is a prime example where open, outside the box, open thinking, I think is quite logic. I'd like to know though, if we was to refuse this application on the grounds that it could be viable, it could be made profitable, would that be a reasonable grounds for refusal if it was to go to appeal?
Through you, Chairman, certainly of the members are entitled to reach out to you. However, members will also be required to provide evidence to substantiate that to you as well.
Can I also add that it is a major application, so you remember how important they are.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've had a good debate on that one now. We have a proposal, the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? 9-3, the application is approved. Next application is in Overston and it's 0133.
Thank you, Chair. This is a site on the Cycle Road, which is the main road that runs right through the centre of the village. For those who know it, it's currently a village shop, which is a typical sort of old type village shop where it's in a flat roof building attached to the side of the house. And the proposal is to demolish the existing shop and the garage and replace it with a purpose-built shop, which will sit at the front of residential accommodation. Everybody basically seems to think it's a pretty good idea. So why does it come to committee, I hear you ask? I think there's been some debate in the office and with Simon, our legal advisor, as well, as to whether it is or isn't contrary to policy R1. So we erred on the side of caution and we thought, well, we better bring it to committee. Because obviously, as things stand, we've got the Part 2 local plan, we've still got this clause in the court strategy that says we don't need any more residential in the rural area. So it's effectively one more house in the rural area. Having said all that, it is within the confines of the village, and there's a debate on whether we actually meant that to mean anything in the confines of the village. But as Simon's also pointed out, under R1 we're supposed to be enhancing local facilities, and clearly providing a new village shop to replace the existing village shop is going to enhance local facilities. So anyway, we thought we'd just bring it before committee just to make sure that if it was contrary to policy, that's the protocol and that you do consider it. Just to say as well, they're going to condition on to say that they have to provide some details of a temporary shop, which probably be a porter cabin or something that they provide, so the shop use will continue during demolition and rebuilding process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Keith. Local member? There isn't one, is there? No. So members. Councillor Thatcher and then Councillor Evans.
Yeah, it's a great idea and it's accept officers' advice.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thatcher. Do you have a second?
Yes.
Councillor Evans.
I was going to second, and because the shop will remain open during the construction, I think that is a great outcome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? If not, we have a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in agreement, please show. Unanimous. The application is approved. Next application is in Barby, and the number is 0229.
Thank you, Chairman. Manor Works Bar is actually an industrial and office development within the open countryside north of Barby Village, about 500 metres from the edge of the village, and is currently occupied by existing business at the moment. Hopefully I've pronounced this right. The company owns it at the moment is Sane Deutschspan, and they have a two-storey office building that's there. The warehouse building is adjacent to a previously used for servicing and repair of the farm buildings. However, this is predominantly ceased now, and the warehouse buildings themselves are largely vacant. The proposal before members tonight seeks consent for the construction of new office building, which would be sited just to the north of existing office buildings. You'll see that there's been some concerns raised by our policy team. The reason that because the site's in the open countryside and there's no path link to the village, it's clearly divorced from the village, there are concerns raised about the sustainability of the site itself. However, the site also obviously accommodates and supports an existing rural business. And as such, the officers feel that this type of proposal is also supported by the NPPF, which supports new and existing rural economy businesses, both through the conversion of existing buildings and well-designed new buildings. Regards to the design of the building, it remains a two-storey building. It uses existing access, which is, as you see, is available on the photograph, and is close to the existing office buildings as well. And as such, officers are recommending this application be approved, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. We have a speaker. Mr. Blegerson, who's for the application. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Shall I stay here? Just like, okay.
Are you okay? It's all right, I'm slightly deaf, so I couldn't hear you. You can stay there as long as we can hear you.
Fine, I'll shout.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good evening, members. My name is Tim Plagerson. I'm a planning consultant at RPS Planning, and I've been asked by the applicant to come tonight and just present briefly in support of the proposed development at Barbie Lane. Firstly, I'd like to support the conclusions of the officer's report and recommended conditions. As many of you will be aware, this site's previous use was as landfill generated from the construction of the M6, and the subsequent construction of the commercial building which Shane Duitsbar currently occupy. The existing building, which you can see just to the south of the proposed building, is ageing, and the office elements in particular are in need of significant refurbishment in order to maintain active use. In addition to this, SDF are seeking a showroom facility for them to display their agricultural products. To ensure continuity of office accommodation and to create the refreshed image on the site, a new custom designed facility was the most straightforward option for the proposal. SDF have made it clear that if the additional space cannot be provided, unfortunately they will need to consider moving from the site. Accordingly, this application is now critical for SDF, who wish to retain their presence on the site and maintain their local employment base. As was mentioned by the officer a moment ago, the NPPF, particularly paragraph 19, states that significant weight should be placed on the need to support economic growth through the planning system. The proposed development would have significant economic and social benefits through the provision and safeguarding of jobs on the site. There was a brief discussion over whether the site is previously developed land or not. Now, I'm convinced that the site does meet the definition as set out within the NPPF, which includes land previously used for landfill purposes. But regardless of this, it is made ground with limited environmental value. The site could not be put to agricultural use, for example, without the soil being restored. Overall, given the economic and social benefits from the proposed development, which the development will bring to the area, and the lack of environmental harm, I would encourage the councillors to take on board their officer's recommendations for approval, subject to the conditions as set.
Thank you, sir. Well, the local members declared interest, so members. Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you. I think on the face of it, this seems quite a good idea. I'm just interested whether this actually increases employment in the area, or is just a transfer of people from the old office to the new office. I don't suppose officers would know the answer to that.
I can find out for you. Applicant, can you answer that question? Does it increase employment, or is employment continued on the same level?
Initially, it's to safeguard the jobs, but the potential that the new building will create does lead to potentially greater employment on the site. So
thank you.
Both, essentially.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie.
Yeah, can I firstly declare that I don't have an interest? Some may be aware that on past applications that have involved Barbary Parish Council, I have declared the interest that my wife was a member, but as she no longer is, that becomes irrelevant. My interest is as a resident of Barbie. Certainly I can see the site as something that it's from the point of view of Barbie. Most would say that it didn't do any harm. At various points, there are huge concerns in Barbie about heavy goods vehicles coming through the village rather than accessing the site from the Morton end. And I know that that is an issue that our local councillor, Councillor Lomax, is not here this evening. But I know that it's something that has been of major concern to her. I'm worried about the argument that's presented that that if we do not approve this, then the company will go elsewhere. Well, look, if we do approve it, there is no guarantee whatsoever that the company is going to stay. And I'm not sure that it is proper that that is part of our discussion, but the officers can perhaps advise on that. It just strikes me as being out of order in terms of a planning decision. Other than that, I've got to say that it's not something about which I have a strong view one way or another. The nature of the site is that it is hidden from Barbie behind the embankment that goes down to the M45. It is a site that can't actually be terribly much bigger or be any worse than its surroundings, hemmed in by the M45 there. But I just feel sort of a slight concern in terms of the way that this proposal has been adopted, has been put to us. I don't like it.
Thank you. It's not uncommon for an applicant to say that they can't get quite
Chair, if I just come back, I feel if I was the applicant, I would probably say that too. But there's a hint of it within the paperwork that we have in front of us, and that is what I don't like.
Would you like to say something?
Obviously, through you, Chairman, there's a number of concerns being raised about whether or not we take into account that the developer could move elsewhere. However, it's not the fact that the use of the buildings themselves is, in terms of economic benefits, it doesn't just bring employment, it brings those who are employed within that business also live in the area, they obviously also use the facilities within our area and generate economic benefits in that context as well.
If I
could further clarify, there's no reason why the applicant can't use his 3 minutes to demonstrate the benefits or disbenefits of the application being approved or
Precisely, Chair. I mean, my argument is not, it's not with the applicant or the applicant's representative. It's as to what it is that we ought to be discussing. And in the final paragraph on page 32, there's a hint that this is perhaps something that that we ought to take note of. As far as I'm concerned, I would be interested to know if we were. You may say that this part of my logic is this should not be something for us to discuss. I'm not aware of anybody in all the years I've been in Barbie who either works at this site or knows of somebody who works at this site. I'd be interested to know just how many people are actually employed there. It is outside, as you say, the confines of Barbie. The geography means that it gives that sense of being even more distant from Barbie, and I'm not sure that Barbie gets any economic benefit from it whatsoever.
Okay, thank you. So,
the issue of in this case, a rural employment facility and its continuation in a rural area is a relevant planning consideration to take into account. It's highlighted within the NPPF, so it is a relevant matter for you to consider. It's also relevant within the context of the 3 strands of sustainability. So it's entirely appropriate that it should be considered and referred to in the report. Councillor Rich is absolutely right. There can be no guarantees simply because you, if you were to grant consent, that they would necessarily stay. That will ultimately be a commercial decision that that company will take, although one might take the view that if they've invested heavily in providing additional facilities on that site, they might be more minded to remain than not remain. It still boils down to the fact that it's a relevant planning consideration to consider. So the officers are right to put that in the report. It's, as Chairman said, it's not uncommon. I seem to remember a discussion we had over in Naseby in relation to Rona Leather, where there were issues not dissimilar to this.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we have to look at what we've got in front of us. Derby and Olney Parish Council haven't made a comment, and usually they are very good. If they've got anything that they're not happy with, they say so. We actually have the local councillor come as well, and she's not here. Local highways have got a small problem, which has been sorted out. NCC Archaeology, they've got their conditioning, so they're happy. Rugby Borough Council, no objections. In that case, I'd like to propose that we follow the officer's advice.
Thank you. John, thank you. Thank you. Would you like to speak now?
I've enjoyed it.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Patrick to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Normally I'm very sort of keen on supporting rural and farming type businesses in villages. It does strike me that the proposed building could quite easily fit within the existing site without developing the open countryside. And the other thing that concerns me is the fact that when you've got the current planning rules and law, once you've got a B1 office building there, it could be converted at a later stage. And it worries me that the premises that Deutsche might want to move, and then it would become empty and redundant, and so subsequently with the previous planning applications that have been on this site, it concerns me greatly that there's all is not well. That's my opinion, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Patrick. That would be a concern with any building like this, and sometimes you have to take things that are applicants say. Anyway, we have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Against? Right, the application is approved. Next application is in Chapel Brampton.
Chair, could we get Mr. Councillor?
Oh yeah.
Might be an idea.
Better get some councillors back, yeah. Do we need them?
Thank you.
Right, this application is in Chapel Brampton 0321. We do have a full complement again. I was going to start without you.
Sorry, have you announced it? Sorry, Chairman, I wasn't sure if you'd actually announced it or not. I can't remember that one. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah.
That's two of us without Alzheimer's, yeah.
Okay, we're in Chapel Brampton on Back Lane, which for those of you who don't know it, is a one-way street. So the traffic is literally only going one way, but what in that instance is quite a wide road because it's only going in one direction. These are obviously former local authority houses, which you'll see is a fairly standard design, and they want to do the fairly standard thing that a lot of people do, which is take off the old single-storey outhouse on the side and replace it with a two-storey extension on the end. Indeed, it's already been done, or planning permission has been granted for it to be done on several houses, and you can see one there that's got it on already in that photo. In that particular row. Obviously, the parish council have objected on the grounds that they're thinking, well, getting these applications and they're all starting to turn a row of terraces rather than semis. But when you see the gaps between, I think, I have to say I disagree with that view. There's still insufficient room in between. And they're concerned about parking, but it's not a classified road. Highways haven't really said anything, and they have got to drive up into the front of the property. That white grass bird is also in the conservation area actually, so when that is available for people to park on, in theory, on that part of the drive, although highways won't like it very much. They'd rather they pulled into the frontage of the property. The additional accommodation is one extra bedroom. Having said all that, so that's really all they're doing. They're adding on one more bedroom. So in theory, it could be one more person living there, maybe one extra car. I think our view is, given where it is, given that it's a one-way street, given that there's quite a few of those houses which have got driveways now off the road, which they probably didn't have when they were originally built. We don't see it as being a major issue. We don't agree with the parish on the terracing argument, and consequently recommending approval, Chairman.
Thank you. Local member, Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've looked at this. Obviously, I drive past there quite a lot. You can hardly see them from the road because you're too busy trying to dodge through the parked cars. It is one way, but people do park very inconsiderately along there. Not really much to say except that I would propose officers' advice, or accept officers' advice.
Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Patchett. Wish to speak?
No, yeah.
Okay, anybody else wish to speak? If not, we have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show it. Unanimous. Thank you, the application is approved. Next application is in Walgrave and the number is 0337.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've heard you announce that one. Yeah, this is a bit of an interesting one, really. Members will probably be aware, although they don't actually normally come before you because they're normally done within the delegated powers of their effectively permitted development. Under the changes the government brought in 3 or 4 years ago now, not longer, they brought in a thing whereby people could convert agricultural buildings to dwellings in the open countryside. And unfortunately, people have chosen to convert some, shall we say, non-traditional, as in modern agricultural buildings to dwellings. And it's now become what's known as Part Q, but it effectively gives them a planning permission for a residential use on the site. And you might be aware they can have up to 3 dwellings on each site up to a certain limit on size. Now there's been a growing trend, and what people are doing is, and that's what this application is about really, they're getting this Part Q permitted development through because it's via a prior approval procedure, which is why it doesn't normally come to planning committee. And then they're seeking to trade that up for a replacement dwelling. Now I've got mixed views about this because I think, well, you were given permission, deemed permission if you like, in the permitted development order for a conversion, not for a new house. And if you'd applied to build a new house on this site and the policy, you probably would have been refused. But there's a concept in planning law that you should know that if I trained you, which is what's called the fallback position, whereby people can say, well, I've got permission for this, that's really the starting point, not going back to zero. And of course, they have got this deemed planning permission, which now effectively becomes a normal planning permission as it's permitted development, to convert that building into a house, but it would look like that. And quite understandably, in front of what are quite a pleasant traditional set of farm buildings that we saw in the photos, I think they had some lovely detailing being done on some of them. If you can just find it again. Yes, you can just see the archways there. There is one that shows it quite well. There it is. Quite understandably, they're saying to us, well, do you know what? You don't really want me to stick that horrible ugly building, well, the building's there, but you don't want me to convert that to a house and just have it there still in front of those buildings, do you? I'd far rather build that as a new house, and you probably agree that it does look a lot more pleasant than what's been approved. So reluctantly, given there is a fallback position, I think we've come to the view that if the question is simply, would you rather they built or have on the site an ugly tin shed house or something that looked like that, we would say, or reluctantly, yeah, we would have to agree that is better. And therefore, although it's permitted permanent to do that, that would actually be a better outcome to be on the site. And really that's what we're about as planners, really. We're trying to get the best we can on the site that's going to be there for the future, really. So it seems a bit bizarre, although they've got it sort of through the permitted permanent system, to actually say, well, yeah, we'd rather you build the ugly one. So on that basis, I say, although it does feel like we've kind of used the system, if you like, to get something they wouldn't have otherwise got normally under planning policy, which would have said no new houses in the open countryside, unless they're, you know, for agricultural purposes, in this case on a farm or whatever. We feel we have no choice now but to recommend approval for the replacement dwelling. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Keith. Speaker, Miss Norman, is the agent.
Hi, I'm Fiona from Bidwells in Oxford, and I am speaking in favour of the application. Following the successful application for prior approval to change the use of the Grainstorm to residential, we're seeking planning permission to knock down the Grainstorm and replace with a more sympathetically designed dwelling, which is in keeping with the 19th century new plan brick farms and original farmhouse. Prior to submitting the full planning application, we submitted some draft proposals to Daventry District Council and sought pre-application advice. During this process, we were advised to reconsider the design of the proposed dwelling and seek input from a heritage consultant. We were also advised to relook at policy R1, the spatial strategy for rural areas, which was part of the West and Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy, and save local plan policy HS24 for new residential developments in the open countryside. The policy issues arise because the proposal was neither for a change of use of a building referred to in policy R1, nor is it to establish a complete new dwelling, because we have already secured Class Q approval. This is the change of use from agriculture to residential and community development. Under HS24, whilst replacement dwellings are supported, the Class Q approval here has not been commenced. On the basis that the proposal to replace a farm with a new dwelling following Class Q is not specifically referred to within current policy, it is useful to refer to recent field decisions to establish the principle of the development. Two separate field decisions are discussed within the officer's report, the Great Wapson Farm case and the Floor case. In the Great Wapson Farm case, the inspector gave very significant weight to the existence of a residential prior approval and granting permission for a new dwelling within the open countryside, despite the proposal being contrary to policy. In the more recent Floor case, the inspector also acknowledged that the existence of a valid grant of prior approval under Class Q meant in effect a dwelling can be created on the site irrespective of the outcome of that appeal. Both appeal decisions reflect the importance of looking at the impact of the proposed new dwelling on the surrounding area. Within the village design statement for Walgrave, it is noted that New Lodge Farm includes buildings of interest dating from the 19th century. It states these buildings involve rural styles of architecture whilst defining the characteristics of the space. We sought advice from our architect and heritage team on the design of the proposed dwelling. The proposed design does not seek to replicate the exact built form of the 19th century modern farm layout, but it resembles a more organic approach. Rather than taking the appearance of a single dwelling, it looks like a collection of 3 traditional barns. It is subordinate to the original dwelling and seeks to improve on the aesthetics and setting of the site by the replacement of the modern rainstorm, which is a large uniform structure of limited architectural value. We commissioned an aerial view of the site to help to illustrate the impact of the proposed dwelling on the complex of the buildings in the immediate area, and we believe that this demonstrates that its design will have a positive impact on the immediate New Lodge farmyard, and we also hope that the community also shares the same view. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Local member, Councillor Parker, is it? Are you Walgrave?
No, sir.
No.
Can't see you.
It's Anne Carter Walgrave.
Sorry?
The local member is Anne Carter Walgrave.
We should speak, Councillor.
Just a little question, because it will be a new building, I know they haven't built. Will it be subject to seal?
I presume it will, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
I really thought about it.
Yes, I thought.
I mean, it might be that it's a self-built exemption claim,
yes.
But yeah.
Equally, obviously with the demolishing building, they can.
But they do get, they do get credit.
Space there for
Yeah,
floor
I was
space
gonna
to counteract against.
say, they do get
as well.
credit. So I don't know if someone's done the calculation, but that's a pretty big grade store.
Yes. Well, because as you said, we are in a position that planning permission was granted under a queue because it was a grand store and it wasn't very pretty. My only fear, and as you said it, we have a lot of old barns that are of that non-interesting value artificially, and we will have in the countryside quite a lot of those new buildings that otherwise would never have had a planning permission. So it's a sad case we are in, because I would love to find a reason to go against officer advice, but I cannot see. And my only consolation that if they pay seal, so at least we get a bit of money. So I will wait for to see what the councillor advise or propose. I will not make a proposal yet.
Chairman, if I can just interrupt, I just noticed at the top of page 58, first paragraph, it does actually say that the floor space to be demolished outweighs the new floor space to be created, so it doesn't actually attract seal on that basis.
No. Okay. Next speaker is Councillor Frenchman.
Thank you, Chair. I feel a little like when we are dealing with retrospective planning applications, it always makes me feel a bit strange or whatever. A technical question first. Is the new build lower than the current grain store height?
I don't honestly know, but I mean, the ridge height of the grain store, the ridge height of the grain store is probably quite high. Obviously, it comes down lower on the eaves height.
I noticed there was actually a dimension drawing of the.
I'm just trying to see.
Scale.
But I have to say that I feel a little like Councillor Irving-Swift. It is in open countryside. The barn that's there has obviously been there several years and is an accepted part of the countryside. It would be interesting to call the developer's bluff and refuse this and see what they would do.
Yeah, that's an interesting.
And because we've met, I would guess, in answer to what Councillor Owen-Swift says, it doesn't meet the requirement of R1, Part 2. And if that is the case, and I ask our legal representative if that is the case, then that would be grounds for refusing it.
Would you like to comment on it?
Well, yes, it would, insofar as you've met your rural housing requirement, and this is clearly rural housing. It's only one property though, but yes. And I think you clarified my point. It's when you seek to call the developers bluff and run with Park Q, or whether you say, better the devil you know. Arguably, what's in front of you.
Well, I will throw it open and say I propose that we refuse officers' advice on and use R1 Part 2, is it, as a grounds for refusal? Because it's in open countryside.
Yes.
Is that Councillor Ritchie, yes? Right, I've got you down as a speaker. Do you want to speak now on it or not?
I have a similar concern that if there's a way in which these regulations can be manipulated, they're only manipulated because we allow that to happen. The countryside is full of relatively modern-looking barns. I would be interested to know how old this warehouse actually is. It doesn't look all that old. But I just thought part of the rationale in allowing existing farm buildings to be converted must be that it preserves the sort of rural appearance, the rural scene, which is surely important. I don't think that the developer necessarily wants to knock down a barn and build a new house because of its concern for the rural environment. There's a profit motive here, and I just feel that we're in a position that we should, confront this and say, look, the rules are the rules. If you want to convert that barn into a house, fine, convert it into the barn for a house, and you see, if you can manage to sell it to somebody. I just think that this is opening the door to opportunities for people, whatever barn they can find wherever in our district, to come along and say, look, I have got a barn. I'm first going to look for planning permission to convert this, and then, because the thing is so clearly unadaptable into a decent looking house, I will knock it down and build the house that I actually want. I just feel that we could be taken for a ride in this, and that we have got to be clear that if the regulations allow people to convert this barn into a house, let them convert the barn into the house, but let's not go any further than that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Chairman, can I just add, listening to Councillor Ritchie following on from Councillor Daventry, it does imply that there is a stark black and white choice. You either go down the Park Q route or you accept this application. Of course, you are missing the other point is they could appeal the application they've made, in which case they could still get this development. And the agent has already referred to the Great Watts's farm, which I seem to recall is down in Devon. I have read the decision. It's not on all fours with this, but there are a lot of similarities with this particular case. So there is some suggestion that this might actually succeed on appeal. So you do need to bear that in mind if you're minded to go down this route, because it is not a stark choice between this application or parking.
Thanks, Simon. Keith, do you want to say anything at the moment?
I just wanted to come back on the question because we've been frantically measuring here while we've been having a little chat, should we say. The ridge height is 1.5 metres more than the ridge of the actual grindstone.
So it's tall.
Yeah, but only that main ridge of the main house. The rest of it is lower than the ridge of the grindstone.
Thank you, Keith. Right, next speaker is Councillor Charntley.
I'm sorry, can I just interrupt on a technical issue? Can we, is that an issue for like massing and density, or
I think,
in terms of refusal?
I think policy HS 24 allows replacement dwellings, and it says something about a similar scale of massing to what's already there. I mean, that policy came in, just wanted it back a long time now, about 25 years ago. That policy came in because back in those days we had people who were looking to convert small dwellings in the countryside and replace them with mansion houses. And I was saying, oh, well, I've got this residential use on this shack, for want of a better word, and I want to replace it with something that's 3 times bigger, 3 times higher, 3 times wider. So we decided, having gone to a couple of appeals on similar situations, we said, well, we need a policy here to say that it can have a replacement dwelling, but it's got to reflect what's there in the first place. So there is that policy still in place, really. Of course, the difficulty is, nobody ever thought back in those days that you would just be allowed, as permitted developments, basically, to convert to modern agricultural buildings of that size and that appearance to residential. So we never thought back in those days we'd be faced with trying to swap that for what's being proposed here. So that, that is part of the dilemma, really. That it's kind of a policy that we've got that's kind of out of its kind of envisaged use, if you like, because in theory, on the basis of that policy, they could just recreate another grain store of that size. And so that's the replacement dwelling, but clearly they haven't done that. They've done something different to try and, change the appearance and make it more acceptable to fit in with traditional farm buildings. I mean, that's the other problem with this park here. I don't know whether the government even thought this was going to be a likely scenario. But when they brought in this permitted developments, you're quite right, really, they were giving permitted developments for a conversion of existing farm buildings. I think they probably thought it would be a conversion of traditional farm buildings, which is like what we've seen, the brick buildings with the detail. And to be quite honest, no one's got a problem with them being converted, again, 25 years ago. We used to allow residential conversions of those farm buildings. But of course, what's happened is, everyone who's got a modern farm building, which is pretty well every farmer in this district, has put in for a park here. And and said, well, I'll get a part of queue on my building to convert it to a dwelling, and yeah, I mean, I am concerned about where it's all going as well, really, because if you let one go, you know, then the next person's going to say, well, they got it, I want it, I want it, I want it, I want it, and they're all basically modern agricultural buildings, all like that, in the open countryside, you know. So up to a point, yeah, I can see what your concerns are, but unfortunately, we've got this legal concept in planning about the fallback position, and that's what we're going to argue about if you refuse it and if we go to appeal, because that's what the other appeals have been argued about. And clearly in those other appeal cases, inspectors have basically given weight to the fact that they could have that building there. And the other problem I've got as a planner is they can't, in all honesty, sit here and recommend to you, let's have the ugly building and let's refuse the nice building, because what's the point?
Thank you, Chief.
And just to clarify, the prior approval one is bigger in square footage than the one that's recommended, hence there being no civil to pay.
Okay, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chairman. I have several things I want to say. Firstly, of course, the permitted development conversion of the agricultural building to dwelling is there. We can't argue that it shouldn't be, because it is. Secondly, it is a mistake to argue based on the statement that I think somebody's out to make a profit here. That's true of every development, and it's irrelevant in planning terms. Thirdly, we cannot make a decision based on our speculation as to what somebody else might do somewhere else in the future. We have to consider this application. I think because of the advice we received about the fallback position, it is clear that the applicant is really applying for replacement of an existing dwelling which hasn't yet been constructed in accordance with the plan, but that's okay, he's got that permission. That is, if you like, not the intention, but that was due to a lack of understanding of those people who make these rules, whose vision is limited by the M25. They can't see beyond it. I know that because they've told me that in the past. I've told you before, I've been told by government officers, nothing of any importance happens outside the M25. And they believed it. So we can't make our decision based on the fact that the real reason for doing this is to make money. We can't make the decision based on the fact that somebody else in the future, somewhere else, might come up with a similar scheme. In theory, there is no such thing as precedent in planning. Every application has to be dealt with on its merits. As to the invocation of Policy R1 Part 2, I think you'll find a reference in there that there's an unless about improving the environment. And I think that from what we've already heard from a planner, that replacing a house that looks like that with a decent looking house would count as an improvement to the environment. So I don't think anybody's got a leg to stand on to stop this, and I propose that we accept officer's advice.
Yeah, we've already got a proposal.
Yeah, okay, well, bear me in mind when we...
We'll look at that if that fails. Right, Councillor Longley next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'd like to start by saying if Councillor Chandler does in fact put that proposal, I would absolutely second it. And I think what he said there, a lot of the items I was going to bring up, that was very, very, very sound advice. It's interesting to see that the footprint of the new building is smaller than the currently existing ones that have been knocked down, or been modified. And if you look at the pictures of the existing barns, the old ones, they look pretty dilapidated to me. Certainly in need of some work on that. So my feeling on this is that the officers have been very pragmatic. I think using the fallback position, what's the odds of doing something different? There isn't any. And I think we should definitely avoid the macho approach here. So I'm absolutely going to vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie's already spoken. Councillor Ed.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine was more a question. I just wondered who exactly is going to live here. Do we know? Because the group of buildings around are going to be converted, got permission to convert to 3 units. The farmhouse that's there at the moment is currently unoccupied, but is in reasonable condition and has been tenanted up to fairly recently. And then we've got this big house. It sounds as though somebody's trying to build a village in the middle of the countryside. I just wondered who exactly is going to live in these places.
Is that a planning matter?
I don't believe it's going to be.
No, not really. I don't know anyway, to be honest. I mean, again, the permission that's granted under the community development by Park Q allows for the conversion of that outbuilding into 3 dwellings under that use class. And again, when the legislation first came in, a lot of authorities, including ourselves, said, oh, well, if you've already got 2 dwellings on the holding, you can only have 1 more dwelling. When the government effectively clarified and changed the legislation, they said, no, we're making it quite clear, you can have 3 dwellings under this part of the permitted development, regardless of how many of the dwellings is on the site. As it happens in this case, they've just got permission to convert it to 1. But in theory, they could still convert 2 more, or up to the floor space, to 2 more buildings, to 2 more residential uses. That's what's allowed. And if you came to my training session on the rural white paper before we had the shock announcement of the general election, so I'm not quite sure what's going to happen now, you'll know that they were mooting, allowing another permitted development for 2 additional dwellings for farm workers. So that would make 5 in all that could be done for converting the barns. So really, yeah, who's going to occupy it isn't really an issue, to be honest. It's residential use and it doesn't really matter who occupies it. But clearly the government previously were thinking, we don't care if they have 5 conversions now as residential on the farm.
Okay. And Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Can we not put a condition on for these dwellings that they have an agricultural use? Is that not possible? Because I know there's many cases where there is dwellings in the countryside and it's precisely that...
I'm advised by a legal man. What you're saying is no.
Because this isn't being applied for as an agricultural dwelling, and obviously this is the difficulty we have with this Park Q permitted development. That isn't a requirement of it. You might remember we had a debate before about a new dwelling at West Haddon, or on the way to West Haddon. And the issue there was, well, they could convert one of the barns to a dwelling, but they put up an old barn or rebuilt an old barn instead. But since then, I think they might well have exercised or said they're going to come back to get conversion of the barn for a dwelling. But basically now it can't be agricultural type. It just says they can have three units. I mean, part of my response to the latest government proposal to allow 2 more dwellings for agricultural workers is, well, on the basis that they can have 3 anyway, and they won't have an agricultural occupancy condition on them anyway, which does restrict the value of whatever they do, because that's recognised, by the chartered surveyors, etc. Why would you, in any event, build 2 more with a do value for agricultural occupancy while the condition going on, if you didn't have to? So basically, no is the short answer. They don't have to have an agricultural justification, because the building they're seeking to replace with this, the Park Q permission, doesn't have an agricultural justification.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think we are where we are. I think it's a pity that the new build will have the gable. I think it would be aesthetically more pleasing without that gable sticking up skywards. But apart from that, it's all been said. We're replacing a grain store. Will they keep the grain in the lounge? Probably not. But aesthetically, I would have liked that gable end to not be there. But I totally agree with officer advice.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal the application be refused, which has been seconded. The reasons have been given. All those in favour of a refusal, please show. Seven. Right. All those in favour of approval. So, no, we can't go the opposite way around, can we?
Yeah.
All those against that proposal, please show.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, Chairman, you get a casting vote.
I'll put the casting vote against the proposal.
I want to go for this here.
So in other words, you're accepting officers' advice, is that right?
No.
No,
No,
that's
Not to refuse it.
Not to refuse.
That's not to refuse it.
So now
Now we come back to Councillor Chandler's proposal.
Yes, I propose that we accept officers' advice.
Right, and you indicated that you would second it.
Very happy to second that.
Right, all those in favour of that, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6.
I've got mine. Wrong. Those against? Casting votes on approval. It's a difficult one, and I understand the committee's views. In fact, I'm sure those people that voted the opposite way consider the government made the rules. What are we going to end up with?
I find it very depressing that this committee has rolled over and let its tummy be tickled because it feels it will not make a difficult decision. And I'm very disappointed in the chair for supporting the officer's advice in this particular occasion, because I think with these are cases we should be fighting and, if necessary, creating a precedent.
You may well be disappointed, Councillor Frenchman, but I consider it a difficult position in this particular case to actually support the application. It's very fine, it's very difficult, and there are two views. No, I didn't have to vote, but I do feel like you do sometimes.
Surely the decision's been made, there's no further discussion required.
But the application is approved. Full stop.
Chair, I wonder if there is a slightly different issue. I feel that the difficulty that we've got arises from the legislation. A number of people have felt that yes, that look, perhaps there was little that could be done to refuse such an application because of the fear of a legal challenge, because of the legislation. If this is an issue, I'm quite sure that not even a Conservative government would have come up with legislation that was silly as to allow modern farms or corrugated metal to be converted into houses. And I just wonder if this is something on which the councillors should not be making representations.
I'm sure it has done at the required time. You did have made comments about it.
Well, we respond to all the government consultations that they put out when they're proposing these ideas, but obviously they generally tend to not listen and do what they want to do. But I think it certainly caused a lot of controversy. We subscribe to a website for planning officers and planning practitioners, and there are hundreds and hundreds of cases on these park queue commissions from all around the country, because they are the bay and rural areas planning life, if you like. Because quite rightly, as you say, some ramshackle tin sheds, people are coming in for all sorts of things, saying, I'm going to convert this as a park queue. And the other disappointment for me personally is there's nothing to stop them applying for a new grade store next week. And Councillor Paul said where they're going to put the grade, well, in the new building they're going to apply for next week as permitted development under agricultural PD bonds. I mean, yeah, I do really have sympathy with members. It is basically being used for a purpose that I don't think the government envisaged, and whether they're actually interested in listening to any representations on that basis, I can't honestly say. I'm very happy to write to them, to be honest, and just say, you need to be aware this is being used as a way of getting new houses in the open countryside where they otherwise would not have been got. Do you want to have a think about it?
I'm sure we'd all agree that that might be a good idea.
I'd suggest probably the appropriate forum is to raise it as a motion in council.
If through you, Chairman, if I could just add, this was a discussion earlier on when it was at our briefing this afternoon. It was a discussion, I'm sure, before this was on the planning committee agenda, and this was, you know, it was as difficult a decision to recommend this for officers as it was for members to debate it. But ultimately, we're all, as officers, responsible for getting the best possible planning outcome, hence, in the end, why the balance was in
as it was?
I mean, the two difficulties I have is this is legal concept to a site, and it's more of a legal concept than legislation of what is the fallback position in planning law. That is a legal concept. And the other thing, as I say, as a chartered town planner, I can't honestly sit here hand on heart and say, I think you should force them to have the ugly building as opposed to having the building that's more in keeping with its surroundings. In principle, those are my two difficulties. So my hands are kind of tied, but I share your concerns about this is being used as a means to an end when the government probably didn't envisage that was going to be the case. And as I say, the fact that they're then allowed to replace the modern agricultural building with a replacement modern agricultural building just seems to make a nonsense of the whole thing, to be quite honest. I mean, if they said you can't have another building if you use one, that would be better really, but they're just going to come in and say, well, we need it.
Right, I think, I know there are people indicating they wish to speak, but I think that's it. We've made a position, that's the end.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I object to the statement being made that this committee has been rolled over. I certainly didn't get rolled over in my decision. I took the advice of professionals who are doing the job day in, day out, and the fact that why should you, as chairman, vote the way you did is not for anybody else to know other than yourself, chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Paul, and thanks for the comments. We're going to move on now. We'll move on to the next application, which is in Wheaton. And the number is 0349.
Thank you, Chairman. Proposed site, a two-storey semi-detached dwelling beside West Street and opposite the Weaver Beck Primary School. The dwelling itself is surrounded by neighbouring properties, their associated lawns and driveways. The dwelling consists of a downward sloping garden with existing conservatory to the rear. You'll see from the report that the proposal for members tonight is to demolish the conservatory and to construct a single-storey extension to the rear. That single-storey extension will be 10 centimetres deeper than the existing conservatory, 0.5 metre higher, but obviously 5 metres wider, and will span the majority of the rear of the building. You'll see from the report that the parish council raised no objections to the proposal, but a neighbour has raised some concern regarding the proposal and considers that the proposal will result in loss of life and loss of privacy. However, officers consider that given the relationship of the proposed extension to the neighbour's extension and the scale and size of the proposed extension, that neither loss of life nor privacy will result, and as such we recommend the application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We have two speakers. Mrs. Smith, who's against the application?
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I've come here today to actually disagree with the officer's report, which I believe is actually misleading in places. The first thing that she was mentioned was that the proposed development would not be detrimental to the residential amenity of the adjacent residential occupiers. I disagree with this because the scale and density. It is an overbearing given ground levels are different from over a metre higher. It's not even indicated in any plan that's been put on the application. The site is already subject to a large two-scale extension, storey extension, that is just 40 centimetres from the boundary at the closest point and 1.3 at its furthest, which you can see if you see 8683 picture. There's a picture there that will show you, and you can see even on that one on the left. There's another one there. Okay, so you can see how close already it is. The officer's report has also said 2 small side elevation windows will be located on the proposal, which will look onto the neighbouring garden property. However, due to a distance of approximately 3.5 metres from the proposal on the boundary fence as its closest distance, a distance of approximately 5.6 metres between the two properties, do not believe this will cause any residential harm. I disagree with the statement for the following reasons: the detrimental impact upon residential amenity. The officer's report states that the proposed extension will be 3.5 metres from the boundary, and it was just spoken there where it was actually mentioned that it's only going to be 10 centimetres bigger than the conservatory. The proposed extension would actually be less than 1 metre from the boundary at its furthest point and less than 50 centimetres from the boundary at its closest point, due to the garden reducing in width. You can see on that picture on the left, you can see how the boundary goes in towards 91, and therefore when the actual extension is built out 3.5 metres, it will actually come closer to the boundary again. There will be considerable harm of residential amenity of 89, because the officer report states that the rear garden measures approximately 8 metres. The proposed extension to the detail is 7.3 width. Therefore, it cannot be 3.5 metres from the boundary, it can only be less than a metre from the boundary. The garden is 8 metres. Quite often she's mentioned the fact that in relation to conservatory, and therefore it would be the same as the conservatory. The conservatory in the report is at 3.3 metres wide, which then means that it's 4.7 metres away from the boundary. However, the new proposal is actually that it's going to be 7.3. Therefore, it will not be 3.5 metres away from the boundary. It will be less than a metre away. And then when you take into consideration that it's going to go at a depth of 3.5 metres, you will then see that it was going forward. If I could just have one more moment for loss of light and overshadowing. Because of the height of the extension, it already starts at a metre and it's going to be higher than the conservatory. We will lose loss of sight in the afternoons. We will not be able to be in the garden and get any afternoons, evening sunlight. And also the loss of privacy and overlooking. We actually use our garden a lot. We have family, grandchildren, we use it for barbecues, family events, our grandchildren use the paddling pool.
Could you wind up now, please?
Okay. I just want to say that it is, in conclusion, we want it refused down to EN42C, GN2 and NPPF9.
Thank you. The other speaker is Mr. Hogan, as the applicant.
Thank you. We've produced some photos. The first is a plan that was drawn to show the position of our house as opposed to number 89, and we looking at the loss of light. We drew angles of 45 degrees and 60 degrees. And we even drew an angle of 30 degrees just to make sure that the proposed extension doesn't cross any of those particular paths. The next picture shows the path of the sun from suncalc.org to give a sun calculation, which does actually show that in the afternoon the sun is actually shaded, or the properties are actually shaded, not just from our proposed extension, but from other properties and also greenery in the area that we're subject to the same shadow in the afternoon as is number 89. Additionally, on the next picture, we're showing just the difference between the proposed and the existing conservatory. There are slight dimension differences, as in height and obviously the width, but the pictures below do actually show at the moment our view from inside the conservatory, where we've got almost 180 degree visual angle that we can look across the properties of all of our neighbours. When we build, if the proposal is approved, we'll have a brick built wall on the end, which will give better privacy, and if the committee would rather, we would change the windows at the end of the end elevation to either obscure or patterned glass to give better privacy to the neighbours. Just finally, just the reason for the extension, we want to add extra room to the property and also a downstairs WC. My wife's in the last 3 years has had both hips replaced, and we've both got very elderly parents that all use walking aids, and my wife's parents haven't been able to visit our property for nearly 2 years because they can't get in the property and they need access to a downstairs WC, and that really is the reason for our proposal. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak this evening.
Thank you, sir. Local member wishes to speak. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Smith has already summarised some of the queries I was going to raise. I'm speaking neither to oppose nor support the application. Obviously, as local ward member, I have to represent both residents in my ward. But I would like to draw committee members' attention to the top of page 64 of the planning papers, where the officer justifies her conclusion that there'll be no residential harm by the proposal being 3.5 metres away from the boundary fence. We can see elsewhere in the report that the garden is 8 metres wide and the extension is 7.3 metres wide, and it's a fairly simple conclusion to determine that that's only a difference of 70 centimetres, not the 3.5 metres, as used in the officer's conclusion. I think image 8835 provides a further illustration of this distance. It could be argued that this proximity, combined with the height differences, do make the proposed extension overbearing in its scale and density. As the two properties stand, the rear facades are more or less in line with each other, as in image 8835. The addition of the proposed extension could well deprive number 89 of light. The officer's report is, I believe, misleading when stating the distance between the two houses, and in their assertion that that distance is sufficient to allow light in. To suggest that this conservatory is in the same place as the proposed addition, I don't believe is correct, as you can see from images 8686 and 8830. And the height difference means that when viewed from the garden of 89, the addition would stand at 4 metres plus, if not taller. And again, that may block the light from the west. There are also concerns that the sliding patio doors on the proposed extension would afford the occupants a full view of the garden at number 89, raising privacy concerns. And I simply ask that members take into account all relevant concerns, and I trust that they'll arrive at the correct decision.
Thank you. I've got 3 speakers already: Councillor Parker, Councillor Longley and Councillor Robertson.
Just for clarification, the actual distance between the boundary and the proposed extension, you can see from the bottom picture where the rear elevation is that it's actually set in from the side elevation. It is agreed that yes, the boundary also draws in, but it's actually 1.75 metres, not 3.5. If you look at the bottom scale, I think what the officer's done is that they've taken it to 1 to 100 instead of 1 to 50. So the correct distance is 1.75.
Thank you. Councillor Parker then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think actually a lot of the speakers have said the same things, but I'm going to say it anyway because I've written it down. In addition to the previous speakers opposed to this application, who have my concerns, the officer states on page 64, although I acknowledge the concern of lack of privacy, I do not feel it is sufficient to come to one refusal due to the existing conservatory being located in the same place and the intended as, I think that might be use of the proposed. Well, the existing conservatory is on the other side of the house. This is in actual fact an extension over nearly the full width of the house. So I just don't understand that comment at all. Number 2, which has already been mentioned, I also beg your pardon, the small side elevation windows will be located on the proposal, which will look into the neighbouring garden and property. However, due to the distance of approximately 3.5 from the proposal, I think now we're saying clarification of 1.75. That worries me a little bit, because I'm not sure actually what that is now, but it must be closer than 1.75, I believe. I think that's wrong. So I still think that needs most certainly looking at. The other thing is that, as I said before, the windows directly overlook next door, which I don't understand why that's even been considered. As there is also a 1 metre drop to next door, it is obvious there will be a loss of privacy. That will be simply overlooked because of the land differences. There were a reduction in light as the new extension is 3.7 metres in height, an increase of half a metre in height from the existing conservatory, which I remind you is at the other end of the dwelling. In both dwellings, if both dwellings were at the same levels, it would be difficult to approach this application, but they are not, and therefore I cannot support officers' advice as it is contrary to EN 42C, GN 2A and Para 9, the MPPF. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chuck wants to come back on a few points.
You can see on the plan there that the boundaries are actually drawn on the plan there. And so I simply believe, truly believe that the officers just measured it incorrectly. You'll see there's a scale of 1 to 100, but also a scale of 1 to 50 at the bottom of the floor plan as well. So what they've simply done is taken the 1 to 100 scale instead of the 1 to 50 scale. And the boundary is clearly drawn on here. I've measured that myself, and it's 1.75. Equally, there's some concerns raised by the windows. They're actually high-level windows. The very bottom level of that window is 1.8 metres. I find it very difficult for someone to stand there looking out of those windows without standing on his chair and made at that time. There's some concerns about the loss of light. It is accepted that yes, there is a land level difference. Let's look at the position of the extension. The extension itself is actually due northwest of the neighbouring property, and as such, the amount of shadowing would be when the sun actually sets.
Thank you, John. Councillor Longley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go on a rather different tack here because lots of people build conservatories on the back of their houses. It's quite a normal thing to do. However, bearing in mind the rights and wrongs of this particular one, the really bad outcome from this is that you've got two neighbours who tomorrow morning, if it's approved, aren't going to get along too well. And the right way forward here would have seemed to me was they got together and designed a conservatory that was okay for both of them. That's what I would have liked to have seen, and not a public row. This is what we're turning to. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think officers have actually clarified the situation from my perspective, because I was worried about the distance being stated on page 64. Now, that appears to be resolved now. But it strikes me, again, that we have to consider the proposal before us and not, something else. This is what we've got to do. Now, what's the harm here? Overshadowing, we're told. Lack of light, we're told. Doesn't appear to be too difficult to me. It appears reasonable. And from the explanation that we've received about the need for it and making room for it downstairs in Daventry, it seemed pretty relevant. So on that basis, I'm minded to approve what we've got before us.
Is that a proposal or not?
It can be, Chair, if you'd like.
Well, I'm not suggesting it should
No,
be.
okay.
It's up to you.
I wish to do that.
Right, do you have a seconder? Councillor Ed. I've got you down to speaking in 2 speaks time. Do you want to speak now?
It's up to you. I haven't got much to say.
Well, you're taking Councillor Ritchie's place if you do. But you've got quite the right to speak now.
Okay. I will then, please. If these two houses were right next to one another, then I would have problems. But they're not. And any overshadowing that number 89 will get, I would think they already get, because 91 is further down the garden. So any overshadowing will be over from this extension will be over the garden and not the house. And there was a comment made just now about the big patio doors at the back will mean that they can overlook. Well, by the photo that the gentleman showed us, his conservatory's got glass all the way around anyway, so he can see even further now than he will be able to if this comes through. So I'm quite happy to follow the officer's advice.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Ritchie.
Well, first, can I say that in moving the motion, Councillor Robertson referred to, the needs for downstairs toilets and things like that. I find an increasing amount of my time is taken up dealing with neighbours who have had bad hips or replacement hips or other problems of ageing. But that is not a planning reason. And if the present residents decide that they want to move somewhere else, they're not going to take this addition to their property with them. So, you know, surely we have got to make the judgment on the basis of what the building is, not what are the, you know, the current needs for the people who are actually living there. I know that might sound terribly harsh, but that surely is the reality.
No, it can be a consideration.
Can it?
Yes,
Okay.
it can.
I would, just as a question, one of the photographs that was put up was of a garden with a fence that looked like about a... No, there was another one that showed a rather larger, as if it was about that. Which garden? That's the existing garden.
That's the existing conservatory.
The existing conservatory, yeah. And the adjoining house is 87. Sorry, the other side, yeah. Very sunny. I find this an exceptionally difficult judgment to make. Trying to imagine what the sort of shading is at different times of day, and what the visibility is. I mean, you know, we've all, most people at least, to some extent, can see into each other's gardens, or can see what, you know, you can see the windows. But I just find it very, very difficult to get any sense. Is this not one of these issues on which, rather than trying to make a stab at what we think will be the right way forwards, you know, should there not be a visit to the site for those who can, to try to make more of a, you know, more of a judgment? I can't really come down on one side or another of this without actually having seen it.
Thank you.
Chairman, clarify. If I could provide some clarification on that. Obviously, we have an SPD, and that SPD refers to neighbouring extensions and provides some advice. And part of that advice is to help reduce the impacts on properties in terms of reduction of light, in terms of massing. And what that SPD advises that, and from a two-storey extension, that's from the nearest, centre of the nearest window, that it should infringe a 45-degree line, and on a single-storey extension, that line should be 60 degrees. You can see that on that particular drawing, that the line's actually drawn from this, not from the centre of the window, but from the edge of the window itself, and it still complies with our SPD. So, whilst I understand that some members may have concerns that the proposal will have an impact on light, in officer's opinion, it does comply with our supplementary planning guidance regarding impact on neighbourhood properties and extensions, and we don't feel that the impact is sufficient to warrant a reason for a refusal.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 5 more names down to speak. I'll tell you what the order is so you know. Patchett, Frenchman, Irving Swift, Paul and Charter. So Patchett, Councillor Patchett.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. My question is really around permitted development rights. In that, I mean, I looked this up because I've got a sort of a bit of an interest in knowing what the rules were with regards to this. Am I right in saying that if the extension was 2 metres from the boundary that are going across, then they could build that extension without the permitted development rights? Because size-wise, it fits in with the criteria on the website. So is it only before committed an application because it's less than 2 metres to the boundary?
I asked this question earlier at the briefing actually. Because the original property would have only been that big, the permitted development rights have been used up there. So there is, it would have required an application in any case. So there are no permitted development rights for the back bit.
Basically what it is, the conservatory goes beyond the existing side wall of
the original building.
The original house.
Yeah.
Oh, that's correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's that, see that line there?
Yeah.
Goes beyond there.
Yeah, I mean, I looked through this quite extensively because I couldn't work out why they couldn't. It was only the boundary distance that didn't comply really.
If that was the original house, theoretically, wouldn't it be?
Okay, Councillor Pritchard?
Well, I just think if you built a slightly smaller extension, it would be DD right, or no easy to take. It's a long way having the other extension.
25% of the original house.
I see. Right. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Frenchman.
Yeah, most of the points I wanted to raise have been taken up, but I just wonder whether we could condition those end windows to be obscured glass.
We can, if members feel that would address the concerns that have been raised.
They've offered it already anyway.
No, that's not the same
No,
as doing it.
That's true.
Okay, Councillor Owen Swift.
Yes, just for clarification, if the neighbours want to build a wall, a brick wall, can you build a brick wall at 1.8 metre without then? Sorry?
But up to 2 metres.
So basically, if the applicant build a wall of 2 metres, which is allowed without planning application, the conservatory will not be seen by anyone. So it is where we are, and I think it's very difficult, and I will go with officer advice when that has been clarified. So if a wall could be built at 2 metres, that will be my answer to all the questions I have.
Thank you. Councillor Paul.
Thank you, Chairman. The scale and mass, I accept that the officers, I've looked at it and taken everything into account. I think the scale and mass is overbearing. I can't see the logic of wanting to bring the roof height up to just under the first floor windows. We've got an extension on an extension, and now we're going to have an extension on that extension. Reasons were put forward for people visiting and downstairs toilet. That's not part of a planning application, and an extension on an extension could have had that done anyway. I just find it totally overbearing. I cannot conceive why they would want the height to be where it is intended to be, and I see no practical purpose for windows in it anyway, whether they're obscure or not. I can't, I'm reluctant, but I agree with officers, but I can't agree because of the fact that it's overbearing in scale and mass.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Chamberlain.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I draw people's attention to the drawing that's now on the screen in front of you. When the officer earlier was pointing out the difference of scale, whether it was 3.5 metres or 1 3/4, she kept indicating that solid vertical line. That's a dimension line. The actual wall is quite a lot further away from the fence than that. And I think you need to take, that's the wall. That other line is just a dimension line on the drawing. Make sure that you don't get the wrong picture in your head. That is quite a distance.
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. If there is no other comments, we have a proposal that the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? The application is approved. Subject to the frosty glass or whatever. Okay.
Well, that wasn't part of my proposition, but I do accept that amendment if that's what.
Okay, let's put, you accept the amendment then?
Yeah.
Okay. You all agreed with that amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Chair, it's come to my attention that Mr. Christopher Cox is going to speak tonight, who is in fact a solicitor and who he's on.
I've seen him lurking there.
He was anyway. Just that I have done a good business with Mr. Cox, and he actually rents an office on us.
You've got an interest as well.
I'm declaring an interest. The fact it's the same as the previous one.
Okay.
Oh, well, he rents an
So you are leaving then, Councillor Longley?
well, it's the same as the
advice is...
I think on balance you have a proprietary interest as well, so I think it would be appropriate.
Fine.
Yeah. Right, next we come on to the confirmation of an Article 4 report. Before we get Mr. Thursfield to present it, I'm going to Simon to basically run over so you all are dead clear what the Article 4 is about, okay?
Members will be aware, and indeed we've been discussing this evening, that various people have, in various situations, permitted development rights, and they are dealt with under the General Permitted Development Order. By what I can only describe as a miracle of legislative drafting, they actually managed to translate from the old 1995 order into the 2015 order and kept exactly the same article number of number 4 for when you actually take away those general permitted development rights. That rarely ever happens, but it did on this occasion. So the effect of a Article 4 direction when made is you look at a particular area and say there are specific characteristics about this area which would require us to say that general permitted development rights are not appropriate. That does not preclude a person making a planning application, and generally speaking, if they do make a planning application, they often doesn't attract a fee because otherwise they would have had general permitted development rights, if that doesn't make sense. But we have to go through the full process of applying for planning permission. So the effect setting an area because of the character of the area, etc., and providing it with a Article 4 direction is to withdraw those permitted development rights in that area. This has already been done under what is known as the immediate procedure. So this already has an Article 4 direction under immediate procedure, and a non-immediate order has been made. We are now at the stage after a consultation, etc., where this comes before you for confirmation. So we're at the back end of this process, the final stage, if you like, of that process. I hope that clarifies how Article 4 is working.
Thank you, Simon. Right, Keith, can you present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this relates to property 21 Yew Tree Lane, Stratton, and some walls that you'll see. That's why it's got a finished shape on the order. Basically, what we've done is we've taken away the permitted development right to allow that cottage and the walls to be demolished or altered in certain ways that are set out in the report advice there. And the reason we did that was because we thought it made a positive contribution to the character of the street scene. It has a certain character, and we thought that was worthy of keeping in that locality. So to prevent it being demolished as permitted development, we took away that permitted development right. As Simon said, it's a two-stage process in this particular instance. Because it's an immediate threat, we've made under delegated powers an immediate direction that's come into force immediately that we sign the papers. and that stays in force for 6 months, after which time it lapses unless the council decides to confirm it. So that's what this report's about now. It's saying, do you want to confirm the Article 4 direction that prevents permitted development rights of that cottage to be demolished? Or if you're not bothered, you can not confirm it and it will just lapse after 6 months, and then the permitted development right to demolish the cottage returns. Obviously, you've seen the lab representations and you've all seen the various supporting documents referred to by the various parties that I've sent to you electronically over the last few days. But I just think it's important to reiterate here that dealing with this matter tonight, we are not deciding what we're going to do with the new planning application. That planning application will be considered on its own merits, as every planning application is so considered. But each application is considered against the development plan and other material considerations, which include the risk appeal decision that we received last week on this property, which you will also be aware of, and the Article 4 direction. The fact that we've actually made the Article 4 direction will be considerations at that time, unless of course you decide tonight, in case of the Article 4 direction, not to confirm it. So I just wanted to reiterate that point really. As I say, I've referred in the late reps to the inspector's conclusions on the merits of the cottage. Sorry, that screen's just here. On the merits of the cottage, and you'll see what the inspector had to say about it. I think his word was quaint, and he obviously saw some merit in it. He'd been retained, so on that basis, we're recommending that the order is indeed confirmed, and that we prevent that cottage from being demolished as permitted development. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. We have two speakers. Mr. Bainham, who's against?
Thank you. I'm against, however, I agree on making the Article 4 direction permanent for the boundary walls. They're a feature of the village, but it should not include the building. The council believes the building displays characteristics of a local vernacular house and should be preserved as a local heritage asset. The heritage statement you must have seen by Dr. David Hickey suggests not. His qualifications and experience place him as a national expert. He states that the house has been virtually rebuilt twice in the last 200 years, and a large proportion of ironstone cottages survive within this locality of this region. The facts we have are the roof is not original, the joists and purlins are mid-20th century, all floorboards are tongue and groove, the ground floor is concrete. One beam is possibly original. Most beams are modern shallow twin beams with capping. The ceilings are painted fibreboard, not lath and plaster. The entire rear wall has been rebuilt in brick. The window openings are not original. They were reduced in size with bricks hidden by the 1950s render. Dr. Hickey sums up, stating, the remnants of this building did not specifically represent any regional or local characteristics of vernacular houses. So with all due respect, who are we to believe? A conservation officer who even thought the building was worthy of listing, or a national expert? You've only been given short notice to look at the structural report by engineers PRP. The report evidences that structural cracks are present both internally and externally, which is consistent with deterioration of stonework from moisture build-up. Deterioration is evident inside. The report continues that it is highly likely the entire front elevation will need to be completely reconstructed, and this would mean a modern cavity wall and suitable retaining wall in the highway. Unfortunately, I'm not sure if the council has sent you a copy of the building survey. It was prepared by Jeff White, a well-qualified and experienced professional, former senior surveyor for the Grosvenor Estate. He's delivered lectures at the RICS. He states, when all the defects are taken individually, they can be addressed, with the exception of the significant damp of the front internal walls. The conclusion is reached that the inherent problems cannot be solved without significant and total rebuilding. Yes, I was not happy the conservation officer was dismissive of these views. Can you really blame me? So what exactly are we trying to preserve here? A building without heritage merit that needs rebuilding. And Article 4 makes no logical sense. It can't even be a case of protecting the planning for the area. That horse bolted years ago. I mean, if I can pass you across to you in a while, you can see what's opposite, large brick houses. Bearing in mind you have not seen the building survey and have only just received the structural report, you may not feel comfortable to vote. Therefore, I'm open to a site inspection, with the matter being decided in the next committee, which still gives the council sufficient time to make their order. However, if you are to vote, please do so on the facts, not whether you like it or think it's quaint. The views of national experts and a structural engineer strongly support the argument for not confirming this order. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
May I pass these across or not?
Not to the committee, I'm afraid.
Okay, that's right.
We have a rule, it's not just you.
No,
Mr Cox, you want to speak in support of the officer's recommendation?
Yes, please, I do. Thank you very much indeed for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm representing 20 odd members of Yew Tree Lane to support the application. There is very reliable evidence to suggest that without the continuation of the Article 4 direction, that the property would be demolished. The appeal decision that came through on 0332 came through on the 31st of May, and it says that the building makes a positive contribution to the street scene, and it talks about the cottages clearly need of some modernising internal works among other remedial actions, but does not appear from the evidence to be structurally compromised. It appears to be one of limited number of historic features of the village, clearly evident by its materials' quaint proportions, detailing an unconventional internal layout. Setting these factors in the context of the more modern development that surrounds the appeal site, and notwithstanding a failed application on the council's part to have the cottage listed, I am not persuaded by the argument to demolish in favour of the redevelopment scheme proposed. What we say is that the council should take control over the site and not allow it to be demolished until such time as a sensible scheme comes forward, which would replace the existing street scene in an appropriate manner. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Local member, Councillor Frenchman.
Can I resign? No. I'm getting splinters over this. I'm obviously very familiar with this. I've walked along this road many times. It's a historic road on the side that the cottage is on. Opposite is not quite so quaint, and Mr Benyon is quite correct that some of the houses opposite, and I hope their owners aren't here, are monstrosities. But on that side of the road there is from there is quite a historic setting. I was minded to not adopt this report, but having spoken to our legal advisor, who has outlined his thoughts at the beginning of this report, I think we should accept this Article 4 directive, because it doesn't stop the applicant putting in any planning application he wants for subsequent owners to do so. And in fact, I understand there is an application that has come in already, which is DA2 2017-0407. So I would vote that we accept officer's advice and accept the report, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, that's a proposal.
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Yes. Councillor Chandler.
Yes. Thank you, Chairman. I did want to say a couple of things. Firstly, I live in a house that's more than 200 years old and has been extensively altered. That doesn't mean to say that I think it should be demolished. But seriously, I'm seeking clarification. I believe I have seen the surveyor's report. Is that correct?
There was a report submitted that was produced by Mr Walton.
Yeah.
But I think the gentleman referred to a different report, which I haven't seen to him. But I think I basically accept that it's cracked and it needs repairs.
Yeah. And well, that leads me to my other question. If we proceed with this, as I suggested, I would support that proposal, and therefore we make permanent this Article 4 direction, which means that nobody can knock this building down. But if during the next 6 months or so it were to fall down, what would the position be?
Can I just correct you firstly on that, Councillor Chandler? There's nothing stopping Mr Bainland, once the Article 4 direction is confirmed, to put in an application to demolish the property. He's got a few material planning considerations that he may have to consider along the way, but it doesn't preclude that from you.
No.
You can put that application in if you wishes, and that will be considered on its merits.
Thank you, yes, you're quite right to put me right on that, but does that affect the answer to my question, which is what happens if it falls down?
Well, if it falls down, it potentially becomes a dangerous building structure,
Yeah,
and building control and
but,
etc. will
you
be
know,
involved.
nobody broke the rules by demolishing it without making a planning application. I'm just asking the question though.
Yeah. No, I mean, it would be, obviously I don't know because we haven't seen Mr White's building survey report to determine whether or not it is at such a risk. Clearly, if it is at such a risk, Mr Bailey would put that in front of our own building control officers and environmental health officers who'd have to consider the safety of that.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you, thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Paul, then Councillor Robinson. Councillor Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Having read various reports over these last couple of days, I agree with my colleague or colleagues, and I'm happy to accept office as Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wanting further clarification on Article 34, if I may have it. Now, it clearly takes away the owner's right to demolish the property. Does it take away all his development rights, or just that one?
It's the one specified in the order, in the actual recommendation, which is basically alterations to the cottage as well, and the fences, gates and walls, as well as demolishing the actual cottage.
So it takes away all his permitted development?
No, pages 82 and 83 show exactly what.
It could still do an extension to it, for example, on the back or something similar to that. We haven't taken that away. It's mainly the ones that involve partial demolition or works to chimneys, or total demolition or demolition of walls, which he says he's not going to do anyway, but clearly he can't do it if we covered it by the order. But it doesn't take away certain other permitted development rights to do extensions.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Parker.
Yes, I just want confirmation again on 0407, which is not before us, but will come, I'm sure. If in that it says demolish, that's the Article 4, we just take that to one side because we consider what's coming on its merit. That Article 4 is not a blocker in any way, shape or form.
It is not a blocker, it is a relevant planning consideration.
But that's all it is, it's not a blocker.
Yeah, if you basically chose to grant that planning permission, that would effectively override the Article 4 direction, because you will have then granted him planning permission to demolish the cottage.
Right.
And that's our point, really.
Right, so that's why you're saying the next one, because it's not in the conservation area, it's not listed and all those sorts of things. The way, yeah, I've got it now. I think I understand.
Thank you. With nobody else wishing to speak, we have a proposal that the resolution be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Those against? Right, 7-2, the resolution is approved.
Yeah, I pointed earlier on that, but generally speaking, it's against.
Right. Could we have the councillors back in, please? Somebody come. There's a few of them, Councillor Irving Swift on the way.
It's hard to say she's gassing at the moment, so
well, I'm afraid she'll be too late. We're not waiting. Right, Charles, would you like to carry on with the reports?
Just very quickly, just want to request the local requirements list for the council. Effectively, the council local requirements list is basically validation of planning applications to go with the national requirements. And they set out the information which is required to make a application valid. This list has to be reviewed and revised if necessary every 2 years. And the consequences are that if it's not revised and kept up to date, that come September we won't know the information we need to make the application valid. The report basically sets out the main revisions to that list, which are alterations for current legislation and planning policies, including, for instance, to the inclusion of our affordable housing SPD, our biodiversity SPD, requirement for foul drainage details and open space strategy. Our web links have also been updated, and the removal of some applications which are no longer valid, for instance, applications for extension of time limits, no longer valid applications. Also, there is some request for additional information on certain sections, such as Section 106's and SIL requirements on how the SIL's actually calculated, and where applications are submitted electronically. We also wish to request that applicants actually name files to help us assist and obviously reduce the amount of time in terms of providing the file files on the website. Obviously, the consultation itself will include emails and letters which go out to local agents and also be publicised on the council's website. The resolution really we're requesting is just the consultation on that, which will last 8 weeks, and when that 8 weeks period is up, we'll report back to members on any comments we've received and on any further alterations which we feel are necessary.
Thank you, Chair. There's one thing slightly wrong with the report. It says recommended. This committee has the power to resolve. It doesn't recommend it resolve.
And likewise, when we come back with the comments following the consultation, this committee has the power to agree with the requirements.
Yes. So whoever proposes it proposes that we resolve it, not recommend it. Right. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to do just that, to propose that we resolve that this revised list should go to consultation. I particularly welcome the last point. I think colleagues will as well, the naming of files.
Okay. Councillor Fetchman?
I thought consultations were 6 weeks, not 8 weeks.
On this one, it is 8 weeks.
Is there any reason for that?
Naming all the files.
It's different.
Oh, right.
Are you seconding it, Councillor?
Yes.
Thank you. Nobody else wishes to speak, do you? No. Straightforward. All those in favour, please show. Can you put your hands up if you're in favour? No, you can't vote. You can come in the first part. Those against?
Well,
right, that's it. That concludes the committee. Thank you for attending.